Close your eyes. Listen. That whisper, pushing you to fight, hide, or win, vanish or conquer. Whose script is it running? Your ego isn't some abstract monster. It's the invisible puppeteer of your choices, the curator of your fears, the architect of every I should and I can't. It builds empires of ambition and prisons of pretense. But here's the trap. Ignore it, and it rules you. Obsess over it, and it consumes you. This isn't self-help fluff. This is a dissection. We will talk about egos of zeta or prime, shadows of alphas or sigmas. So let's just start the video. Chapter 1. The Flame. Have you ever stared into the eye of a storm and refused to blink? There's a fire inside some people. Not the kind that burns bright and dies quickly, but the slow, smoldering kind that thrives, even when the world tries to drown it. This is the resilient ego. It's the part of you that clenches its fists when fate laughs. The voice that whispers, stand, move, breathe, even as the ground cracks beneath your feet. Picture a warrior, not the kind draped in glory, but one kneeling in mud, bloodied and bruised. His sword is chipped, his shield shattered. Yet, when the enemy taunts him to surrender, he rises, not because he believes he'll win, but because falling feels worse than dying. This is Zeta, or Sigma, whatever you say it. This is resilience, not blind optimism, but a raw, unpolished defiance. It's the refusal to let external chaos dictate internal resolve. Yet this same powerful force can transform into hubris when unbalanced. Excessive resilience ego crosses into blind persistence, refusing to acknowledge when a path leads nowhere. The determination becomes rigidity, unwilling to adapt when circumstances demand flexibility. Studies, like the 2017 Cornell Grit Project, found that individuals with high resilience don't just bounce back, they adapt. They see failure as friction, not finality. But here's the catch. Resilience morphs into recklessness when untamed. Imagine a sailor so obsessed with conquering a treasure that he forgets the hurricane. The same fire that fuels courage can scorch judgment. Stoics call this amor fati, love of fate. Not fighting the storm, but dancing in its rain. A resilient ego, when balanced, doesn't waste energy raging against obstacles. It asks, what can I control? And pours effort there. But when overfed, it becomes stubbornness. Ask yourself, do you rise from falls because you must? Or because you're afraid to admit you're tired? Resilience is a blade. Sharpen it, and it carves paths through walls. Swing it wildly, and it cuts the hand that holds it. The line between strength and stubbornness is thin, drawn not by how hard you push, but why you push. Next time life demands you bend, ask, is this persistence or pride wearing a mask? The answer will decide whether the flame inside you becomes a beacon or a wildfire. Chapter 2. The Fortress Within. Do you find yourself instantly armored when someone points out your flaws? The defensive ego stands as humanity's most common psychological shield, a vigilant guardian of our self-image that transforms even gentle criticism into perceived attacks. Imagine a king, deep inside, thinks he doesn't worth the crown. Paranoid, pacing his ramparts. Every laugh from the village feels like mockery. Every critique, an arrow loosed at his pride. So he builds walls, thicker, higher, until sunlight struggles to reach him. This isn't strength, it's fear wearing a crown. Defensiveness isn't about guarding worth, it's about fearing you have none to lose. This ego type manifests when our sense of worth feels threatened. Those with dominant defensive ego remain hypersensitive to how others perceive them, constantly scanning for potential judgment. When criticized, they don't process the feedback objectively. They experience it as an assault on their core identity. Their immediate response isn't to consider the validity of the critique, but to prove it wrong at all costs. The irony of defensive ego lies in its contradictory nature. While outwardly projecting strength, a 56-inch chest with artificial air, it actually reveals deep inner vulnerability. This facade of invulnerability often masks profound insecurity. The louder one proclaims their perfection, the more desperately they may be trying to convince themselves. The true danger of unchecked defensive ego is its capacity to halt personal growth. When we cannot acknowledge our imperfections, we cannot improve them. The reflexive rejection of criticism creates a psychological blind spot where our weaknesses remain hidden from others and critically from ourselves. Yet when moderated, this same protective instinct serves a vital function. A controlled defensive ego gives us the courage to stand our ground in a world that often tries to diminish us. It provides the backbone to defend our boundaries and advocate for ourselves when necessary. The crucial distinction lies in whether this ego aspect responds proportionally to genuine threats or reacts disproportionately to any perceived slight. When we can separate constructive feedback from actual attacks, we transform our defensive walls into selective filters, protecting what truly matters while remaining open to growth. A 2019 Stanford study on self-perception found that defensive individuals often tie their worth to others' opinions. They don't hear feedback, they hear verdicts. Like a sculptor terrified of chisels, they reject critique, unaware that cracks are where growth seeps in. But here's the irony: the fortress meant to protect becomes a cage. Isolation breeds stagnation. Stoics called this prosocion, vigilance over the mind, not barricading against judgment, but choosing what deserves your walls. A balanced defensive ego listens, adapts, and discards what's trivial. But when bloated, it's a trapped beast, knowing its own legs to escape imagined threats. Ask yourself, do you silence critics to protect your heart or your delusions? Think of a student who snaps, "Grades don't matter," after failing, or an artist who burns canvases to avoid judgment. Defensiveness shouts to mask shame, yet, when harnessed, it can spark growth. A fighter who blocks, punches, and learns patterns becomes unstoppable. The question remains, are you using your defensive capabilities as a shield or as armor so heavy it prevents you from moving forward? Chapter 3: The Phantom Race. There's a track inside some people, not one meant for joy or freedom, but a loop where every lap fuels a hunger that never quiets. This is the competitive ego. This ego type drives constant self-improvement, but does so through external comparison rather than internal standards. Unlike the resilience ego that pushes forward regardless of others, competitive ego specifically needs to outperform someone else. It's not enough to simply win, not just the game, but win over others. One must succeed more visibly and impressively than peers. Have you ever felt your pulse quicken when someone inches ahead, as if their step echoes in your chest? When unchecked, this ego aspect breeds destructive jealousy and fear. Competition is a forge, shaping ambition into action. The competitive ego drives you to claim the podium, to stand taller than the rest. It whispers, "Be the first, be the best," urging you to hone your skills with laser focus and relentless practice. Like two hawks circling a single prey, your attention zeroes in on victory, and every moment becomes a chance to surpass. But this fire can scorch if left untamed. Envy seeps in when others shine, jealousy breeds bitterness, and the fear of inferiority can twist motivation into resentment. Festinger's social comparison theory, in 1954, shows we gauge our worth by others' success. Also, Tesser's self-evaluation maintenance model, in 1988, warns that seeing a friend excel can wound our self-image. When competition eclipses growth, you may sabotage bonds or chase hollow wins, mistaking another's fall for your rise. Stoics remind us that true mastery lies in self-rule, not conquest of others. Marcus Aurelius counseled, "If you compare yourself with others, you become vain or bitter." Redirect the competitive ego inward, measuring progress by yesterday's benchmark, not today's rival. Ask yourself, do I race to outshine others, or to outgrow myself? The arena of rivalry can be a crucible for excellence, or a pit of despair. When balanced, Your competitive ego sharpens resolve, fuels innovation, and forges resilience. But when unbalanced, it breeds isolation and obsessive one-upmanship. Recognize the difference between healthy striving and corrosive comparison, and you'll harness this ego as a catalyst, not a cage. Stoics called this memento mori, a reminder of mortality, not to dwell on death, but to ask, what is this race costing my soul? Healthy competition sharpens, obsessive comparison starves. A balanced competitive ego thrives on growth, not glory. But when unchecked, it becomes a serpent eating its own tail. Ask yourself, do you climb mountains to touch the sky, or to tower over those below? In the next chapter, we'll step into the realm of the superior ego, exploring how the belief in one's inherent greatness can uplift or undo us. Chapter 4. The Hollow Throne. I know most of my viewers are Zeta males, but here, in this tribe, we are here to gain knowledge, self-criticize, and be better, not just feel good about the titles. This is a tribe of Sigmas, and just to know, if you're new here, Zetas are subarchetype of Sigmas. You can watch the video on Zeta males, our most loved video, after this one. There's a throne inside some people, not one forged in service or wisdom, but a jagged seat of mirrors, reflecting only the wielder's face. This is the superior ego. It's the part of you that mistakes pride for power, the voice that sneers, bow, listen, obey, even when the room is empty. Imagine a king, not ruling for his people, but performing for his reflection. His crown is heavy, his robes stiff with gold, yet his court is silent. Why? Because he banished dissent to preserve the illusion of an infallibility. Superiority isn't about leading. It's about fearing the world might see you as ordinary. The profound danger lies in how superior ego creates impenetrable isolation from growth. Feedback cannot penetrate this psychological fortress. Learning becomes impossible when one believes they already possess all knowledge worth having. This ego aspect doesn't merely reject improvement, it fundamentally cannot recognize the need for it. A 2020 UC Berkeley study on narcissistic overconfidence found that individuals with inflated self-views often crash hardest. They don't fail, they prove others jealous. Like Icarus, they soar on waxen wings, scorning the sun's warning. But here's the tragedy. The higher they climb, the lonelier the fall. The seemingly confident stance ultimately creates vulnerability, often becomes the very reason for failure. The refusal to acknowledge limitations leads to poor decisions, based on inflated self-assessment rather than realistic evaluation. Yet even this ego carries potential benefits when properly constrained. When channeled, aspects of superior ego can create resilience against unwarranted criticism and manipulation. The unshakable confidence, if grounded in actual competence rather than delusion, can provide stability in challenging circumstances. Stoics called this humilitas, humility as strength, not self-degradation, but acknowledging you're a thread in life's tapestry, not the weaver. A balanced sense of self thrives on contribution, not domination, but superiority. It's a gilded trap. The king who confuses respect with fear rules a kingdom of ghosts. Ask yourself, do you demand loyalty to uplift, or to erase the doubt gnawing at your ribs? Think of the tyrant who silences advisors, only to drown in his own ignorance, or the artist who dismisses collaboration, then wonders why her work feels sterile. Superiority is a scream, masked as a command. Yet, when tempered, it can inspire. A leader who kneels to listen, lifts others with them. The lesson: a throne built alone collapses alone. True power isn't in towering over others, it's in grounding them. Are you a monarch of mirrors, or a steward of shared strength? Majesty fades. Legacy lies in how many rise beside you, not beneath you. Chapter 5. The Fractured Mirror. Have you ever shattered yourself to fit into someone else's light? There's a mirror inside some people, not one that reveals truth, but a fractured pane, each shard reflecting a different version of who they think they should be. This is the chameleon ego, Sigma's shadow, Gamma's curse. Sigma's greatest superpower, adaptability, when untempered becomes a curse. For Gammas, it's the part of you that dissolves borders between self and the crowd, the whisper that pleads, mold, blend, disappear, until your reflection is a collage of borrowed faces. Imagine an actor, not one on a stage, but in a life where every interaction is a performance. He laughs louder when others laugh, adopts opinions like seasonal clothes, and shrinks his quirks to avoid casting shadows. His mantra, to be loved, I must be nothing and everything. Chameleons don't adapt to survive, they erase to belong. A 2021 Yale study on self-concept clarity found that individuals who lack a stable sense of self often experience chronic anxiety. They don't just fear rejection, they fear existing. Like a river refusing its own current, they bend to every container, forgetting stillness reveals depth. But here's the cost: the more they mirror others, the more they haunt their own life. The challenge of developing adaptive ego lies in its requirement for continuous self-examination. This is where Sigma's second superpower comes in handy. Self-reflection. It demands the courage to question our automatic responses and the wisdom to recognize which aspect of ego serves the moment. This metacognitive awareness requires energy and attention that our other ego states conserve through their automatic patterns. Stoics called this autarkia, means self-sufficiency, not isolation, but anchoring in your own nature. A balanced chameleon ego flexes without fracturing, blending context without losing core. But when untethered, it becomes a ghost, drifting through roles, never home. Ask yourself, do you hide your edges to be accepted, or because you've forgotten how they feel? Think of the friend who just nods through every conversations, his silence screaming validation, or the leader who echoes popular opinion, trading integrity for applause. The chameleon trades authenticity for approval, mistaking camouflage for connection. Yet, when harnessed, this ego can teach empathy, so long as you don't dissolve in the lesson. A tree that bends too often never learns its own shape. This can look like a power, feels like controlling anyone who hears it, but it's actually crowd's echo. Are you a prism refracting others' light, or a flame daring to cast your own? True belonging isn't in fitting in, it's in standing firm, unafraid to cast a shadow. Thanks for watching.